They stamped "denied" on his claim again. Same limp, same folder, same silence. His injury? From a mission so classified it didn't officially exist. And for years, the system buried him in red tape and indifference. But he kept showing up, never angry, never loud, just unshakably present. Then one Thursday morning, a black SUV rolled in. A 4-star general stepped out, walked straight through the doors, and said, "Where's Corporal Elias Rourke?" And suddenly, the system that forgot him had no choice but to remember. If you believe in justice for the unseen, hit subscribe. This story will stay with you. The VA regional office in Montgomery, Alabama, buzzed with the dull rhythm of bureaucracy, printers grinding, phones ringing, the occasional cough echoing off sterile walls. In the far left corner of the waiting room, beneath a flickering fluorescent light, sat Corporal Elias Eli Rourke, 70, one now. Shoulders still broad, back still mostly straight, though the limp in his left leg slowed him on cold mornings. He wore his old field jacket, faded marine green, sleeves just a touch too short, and held a plain manila envelope in both hands, like something fragile. He opened it slowly, careful not to tear the pages inside. His fingers, once calloused from rifle grips and generator repairs, now trembled slightly with age. The letter was short, 2 paragraphs. Language wrapped in legalese and detached courtesy. He didn't need to read it twice. The words were always the same. Claim denied. Injury not service connected. Evidence deemed inconclusive. Eli folded the paper neatly, returned it to the envelope, and stood. The limp pulled at him, but he didn't grimace, didn't sigh. He just walked up to the bulletproof window like he had 100 times before. The clerk behind the glass was young, maybe mid-20s, her eyes flicking between her monitor and the next number in the queue. She didn't look up until Eli cleared his throat, soft, polite, the kind of sound meant not to disturb. "Another denial," he said simply, placing the envelope on the counter. Her gaze dropped briefly. "You'll need to file an appeal. Form 21-958. You can download it online or—" "I don't have a computer," Eli said. Not annoyed. Just factual. She hesitated, then slid a stapled packet through the metal slot. "You can fill this out and bring it back." He nodded, took the form. No questions, no protest. Just a soft, "thank you," before turning back toward the exit. The automatic doors opened with a mechanical hiss, and Eli stepped into the warm Alabama sun, the sharp light catching the gray in his stubble. He paused once on the sidewalk, not for balance, but to tuck the form under his arm, then moved down the steps with slow, deliberate grace. No one followed. No one watched. Just another old man with paperwork. Another appeal headed for a desk. Another name sinking quietly beneath the weight of a system built to forget. But he kept walking, head high, dignity intact. The chairs in the VA lobby were molded plastic, the kind that creaked when you shifted and never quite let you rest. Second row from the vending machine, third seat from the left. That's where Corporal Elias Rourke sat every Thursday at 8:50 a.m. sharp. The same seat, the same posture. A man in stillness, surrounded by motion. On his lap, a battered blue folder, corners curled, binding torn slightly at the seam. Inside, a neatly organized stack of history. DD, 214 discharge forms, photocopies of field commendations, grainy medical scans from Kandahar field tents, hand-scribbled notes from combat medics, who'd since disappeared into retirement or memory. The pages smelled faintly of tobacco and thyme. Some of the ink had started to fade. He had it all memorized anyway. Eli didn't check his watch. He didn't need to. The day moved around him in a slow choreography. Phones rang behind the glass partitions. Staffers clicked across the tile in hurried steps, arms loaded with paperwork. Names were called from a crackling speaker overhead, but never his. He waited, quiet, still. No one spoke to him beyond formality. No one asked why he came back, week after week, holding the same folder like it was a passport to a country that no longer recognized him. A few times, new employees glanced his way with the polite confusion of someone wondering if they'd seen a ghost. But ghosts don't file paperwork. The veterans around him came and went, some young, tense and pacing, others older, slumped with weariness or wounded pride. Eli greeted them with nods, sometimes shared a quiet joke or a cigarette out back. But mostly, he stayed alone. He didn't complain, never raised his voice. When the wait stretched past noon, he'd sit straighter, adjusting his grip on the folder like a man bracing against wind. When his name wasn't called again, he'd gather his things without a sigh. He'd leave the same way he came in, one slow step at a time. Some thought he was stubborn. Others thought he was confused. But Eli Rourke wasn't lost. He knew exactly where he was. He just refused to be erased. The payphone in the corner hadn't worked in years, but Eli still glanced at it sometimes, like it might suddenly ring with news that mattered. Today, though, he sat beside something more modern, a plastic folding table labeled Claims Assistance, while a younger vet scrolled through a VA resource page on his cracked phone, frustration tightening every muscle in his jaw. Marcus Beltran, 32, Army, 2 tours in Mosul, still walked like he expected shrapnel behind every corner. He'd met Eli in the waiting room 3 weeks ago. Said he'd seen too many old-timers get swallowed by the system and wasn't about to watch it happen again. Now, they sat shoulder to shoulder, a generation apart but burdened by the same silence. Marcus tapped the number again. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Then the hold music kicked in the same hollow piano loop that made you feel like you were listening to someone else being helped, somewhere far away. Eli sat quietly, his folder open in his lap. Everything laid out in rows. Blast radius reports, evac orders, a faded combat medic's note. Excessive pressure trauma. Suspect, TBI. Scribbled in pen, barely legible. But Marcus read it like scripture. The music stopped. A brief click. "Hello," Eli began, leaning forward slightly. Then, nothing. The line went dead. No message. No beep. Just silence. Marcus stared at the phone, thumb hovering over redial. His voice was low, bitter. "That's the 5th time this week." Eli looked straight ahead, unmoved. Maybe someone else needed the line. "No," Marcus snapped. "It's not broken. It's designed to forget you." He tossed the phone on the table. "Forget us." The words hung heavy between them. The quiet in that moment wasn't just silence. It was history stacked, folded, filed, and buried in desk drawers. Eli reached forward, slowly refolding the papers in his folder, aligning every edge. "You don't have to keep doing this, you know," Marcus said, watching him. "You've got every right to be angry." Eli's voice was calm. "I'm not angry." "What then?" He looked up, eyes steady. "I'm remembering." And for a second, Marcus didn't speak, because in that simple answer was something he hadn't learned in war, the kind of patience built not on waiting, but on never walking away. The hallway just outside Claims Processing Room B smelled faintly of burned coffee and bureaucracy. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like tired insects, casting a sterile glow on white walls littered with old posters. "Your service matters. We're here to help." Most people didn't even glance at them anymore. But one intern, fresh from college orientation and still clinging to the idea of impact, noticed something different that day. He was carrying a box of toner cartridges when he passed Eli Rourke, who stood against the wall just beneath the posted appointment roster, his hands folded over that same worn folder, his gaze fixed on the floor tile like it held secrets. The intern glanced once, then again. His eyes dropped to the shoulder of Eli's old field jacket. There, frayed but unmistakable, was a patch he'd only ever seen in obscure military blogs and half-redacted documents. A black spade wrapped in red thread, the emblem of Ghost Recon's Operation Wild Dagger, a mission whispered about in certain corners of the internet, never confirmed, never denied. The kind of thing that didn't officially exist but still got men killed. The intern's breath caught. Slowly, he slid his phone from his pocket, held it low, and snapped a quick photo. Later, he showed it to his supervisor, a man with a well-pressed shirt and a drawer full of rubber stamps. The supervisor leaned back, squinted at the screen, and took a long sip of coffee. "Huh," he muttered. "Wild Dagger? That's not even listed on the official index." "Exactly," the intern said. "Shouldn't we?" "No record, no claim," the supervisor cut in. He tapped the side of his mug. "You want to help him? Buy him lunch." The intern frowned. "But if that patch is real..." "Doesn't matter. If it's not in the system, it didn't happen." He stood, brushing past. Denied again. Back in the hallway, Eli hadn't moved. The folder still rested in his arms like a worn Bible. He didn't know he'd been photographed. Didn't know someone had seen what the system refused to. But something had shifted. Because even ghosts cast shadows, and someone had finally noticed his. Marcus Beltran sat hunched over an aging desktop computer in the public library 2 blocks from the VA. The screen flickered every few minutes like it might give up, but he kept typing, eyes burning from too little sleep and too many hours chasing the invisible. He wasn't doing it for himself. Not this time. The more he saw of Eli Rourke, the way he walked, waited, never demanded, the more it gnawed at something inside Marcus he hadn't felt since he'd left Iraq. A duty. He started with the patch, then the rumors. Wild Dagger. Ghost Recon. A name that didn't appear in any official records, but came up again and again in forums and declassified scraps. Most links were broken, some pages scrubbed, but then he found it an old after-action summary, scanned and posted by a retired Navy cryptographer, half the text blacked out with digital ink. In the margins, scribbled in faded pen, a name, Rourke Corporal Cleared Perimeter Confirmed Extract. Another file, this one from 2005. A blurred scan of a PowerPoint slide, marked Confidential, JSOC. Only a few bullet points visible, most redacted. But one line stood out. Operative confirmed. Roar. Sick. Elias Ode. Recon. 3rd Joint Unit C. Briggs. Marcus leaned back slowly. He recognized the name. General Nathaniel Briggs, now retired, but once the commanding officer of the Special Joint Reconnaissance Task Group, a man known for overseeing missions that didn't make the news. The kind where medals weren't handed out because the men receiving them didn't officially exist. Marcus hesitated. He pulled out his phone, opened his email, and typed one line in the subject. "You may want to see this." In the body, he wrote little. Just facts. No begging. No rage. He attached the photo of Eli in the VA hallway, the patch visible on his shoulder. The look of a man forgotten by everyone, except those who understood what he'd carried. Then he clicked send. He didn't expect anything. Not a reply. Not even a bounce back. The system was built to ignore noise like his. But sometimes, if you knock hard enough on the right locked door, it opens. It was a Thursday, humid and slow, the kind of Alabama morning where the air hangs thick enough to press down on your shoulders. Inside the Montgomery VA, the rhythm of routine held steady names called over the intercom, printers humming with forms no one read, patients waiting in chairs that had never known comfort. The lobby lights flickered once and came back dimmer, as if even they were tired. Eli Rourke sat in his usual seat, 3rd from the left, same folder on his lap, same expression carved from patience and war. Nothing about the day felt different. Until it did. At 10:12 a.m., a black SUV rolled into the parking lot. Not a government-issue sedan. Not a contractor's truck. This was something else. Clean. Unmarked. Except for the glint of a Pentagon-issued license plate. The doors opened in practiced sequence. First, the driver. Then, 2 aides. And then a man in his late 60s stepped out. Tall, square-shouldered, coat, unbuttoned, but pressed to perfection. He wore civilian clothes, but every movement said military. Every breath said command. General Nathaniel Briggs hadn't worn stars on his collar in 5 years, but the weight of them hadn't left his voice. He walked with quiet purpose through the front doors of the VA, flanked by silence that followed like an escort. The receptionist looked up without recognition, already reaching for the sign-in clipboard. Then he spoke. "Where is Corporal Elias Rourke?" The pen in her hand stopped mid-stroke. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the printer paused, as if the room itself understood something was happening. "2. Sorry," she stammered. "Do you have an appointment?" "I have a name," he replied calmly. "That's enough." In the corner, Eli lifted his head. Their eyes met. No salute. No words. Just the quiet acknowledgement of two men who'd once lived in the same war, though a lifetime apart. Marcus, watching from across the room, stood up slowly. The general turned toward Eli and took 3 steps forward. No fanfare. No camera crews. Just presence. And for the first time in years, the silence around Eli didn't feel like forgetting. It felt like someone had finally heard him. The general didn't demand to be seen first. He didn't flash a badge or pull rank. He waited. Same line, same chairs, same clock ticking overhead. The only difference was the posture, a quiet, unshakable stillness that seemed to bend the air around him. People noticed. The receptionist glanced up once, then twice, uncertain. The security guard by the door shifted his stance without thinking. Veterans seated along the far wall leaned forward, watching a man who didn't belong in the waiting room but stood there anyway. When his turn came, General Briggs stepped forward. No introduction, no theatrics. Just a single sheet of paper in his hand yellowed slightly at the edges, the ink still bold. He laid it on the counter gently, like it meant something. The clerk looked down. Young, early 20s, shirt untucked at the back. She blinked at the page. It wasn't a form. It wasn't a request. It was a wartime citation, unsealed, unredacted, and signed by General Nathaniel Briggs himself, dated April 17, 2003. Corporal Elias Rourke demonstrated extraordinary valor under direct fire during a covert extraction in Kandahar province. Without orders, and under sustained enemy engagement, he carried 2 injured officers across open terrain to the secondary evac point. Casualties: 0. Citation recommended: Silver Star. Status: declined by recipient. The clerk glanced up, her mouth half open. Briggs didn't raise his voice. "This man carried 2 of my officers out of a kill zone." He looked her in the eyes. He refused his medal. That was his choice. But denying him care? That's not yours to make. The room behind him had gone still. Eli, seated in the 3rd chair, held the same folder in his lap. He didn't move, but his knuckles had gone white. The clerk fumbled for words. "Two'd have to speak to my supervisor." "You will," Briggs said, stepping back. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just stood tall enough that the walls seemed smaller around him. And somewhere deep in the administrative maze of that building, a file was already being pulled from a cabinet no one admitted existed because the name on it had just become impossible to ignore. By noon, the waiting room looked different. Not louder, not more chaotic, just fuller. Word travels fast in the veteran world, not through official memos or press releases, through hushed phone calls, group texts, barbershops, corner diners. Someone heard what happened. Someone said, "Rourke? That Rourke?" And then they started showing up. The first was an old Navy corpsman from Selma, pushing a walker with tennis balls on the feet and a laminated Purple Heart citation clipped to the handle. Then came a woman from Wetumpka in an Air Force jacket 2 sizes too big, her cane painted red, white, and blue. A pair of brothers from Troy arrived with prosthetics polished like parade boots, each holding a folder like Eli's thick, dog-eared, and unopened too long. They didn't chant, didn't hold signs. They just came in, nodded to the man in the 3rd chair, and sat down. By 12:48 p.m., there wasn't a single empty seat. The staff tried to keep pace. Clipboards passed back and forth. Calls made upstairs. A nervous intern offered water. But none of the veterans moved. They weren't there for services. They were there for witness. At 1:05, a black sedan screeched into the parking lot. The regional director stepped out, his suit jacket twisted, collar damp with sweat. He stormed through the double doors like a man expecting chaos and found instead a room of silence. Rows of veterans sitting shoulder to shoulder, eyes forward, waiting for something more than a number to be called. At the far end, General Nathaniel Briggs rose to his feet. He didn't salute, didn't extend his hand. He just looked the director square in the eye and said, with the calm of someone who'd spoken to presidents and casualties alike, "I believe you've misplaced a Marine." The director opened his mouth, then closed it. He turned slowly, scanning the room, all the chairs filled, all the folders unopened, all the stories still sitting there, unread. And in the middle of it, Eli Rourke remained motionless, his folder resting on his knees, his expression unchanged. He hadn't asked for a crowd. He hadn't asked for anything. But for the first time in years, he wasn't waiting alone. The sun dipped low behind the office blinds, casting long gold streaks across the tiled floor. Outside, the parking lot had thinned. The crowd inside hadn't moved much, but the tension that had once filled the air like static had softened. Something had shifted slowly, silently, like the way a storm clears without ceremony. At 4:43 p.m., a door opened near the back. A mid-level claims officer, eyes red, shirt wrinkled, stepped into the lobby. In her hands, a folder. Not Eli's old one, not the battered relic with folded corners and weather-worn ink, but a new file. Thick, stamped, approved. Full combat-related compensation. Medical coverage backdated to 2004. Housing assistance reinstated. Retroactive benefits issued effective immediately. She looked around the room and then walked forward, unsure who to hand it to, but General Briggs stood and took it gently, nodding once before she even spoke. He thanked her without fanfare and turned back toward the row of chairs that hadn't emptied all day. Then he sat. Same plastic chair. Same posture Eli had held for weeks. He didn't offer a speech. Just looked over at the man beside him, the man who had pulled him through blood and mud 5,000 miles and 2 decades ago, and said, almost too soft to hear, "You carried us." Eli blinked, but didn't look over. Briggs nodded to the folder in his hands. "Now we carry you." For a long moment, they just sat like that. Two men who'd once been in a war no one wrote about, who had shared silence under mortar fire, and who now shared it again in a government lobby with vending machines humming behind them. Eli finally spoke, his voice cracked but steady. "Took him long enough." Briggs smiled faintly. "You never asked. That's not why I came." "I know," Briggs said. "That's why it matters." Across the room, Marcus stood with his arms crossed, watching the exchange like a man witnessing the ending of a chapter that had taken too long to write. No one applauded. No one clapped backs or gave speeches. But for the first time in years, the record told the truth. And the system, if only for a moment, remembered its debt. The VA lobby looked the same at first. Glance the same pale floors, same humming fluorescence overhead, same battered magazine rack by the entrance, with last year's time covers and dog-eared crossword books. But something had changed, subtle, quiet, the kind of change that doesn't ask for notice but deserves it anyway. On the east wall, just past the check-in desk, a new brass plaque had been mounted. No ribbon cutting, no cameras, no press release filed under community engagement. Just a name, etched deep and clean into metal that caught the morning light. The Corporal Elias Rourke Lobby for Quiet Valor. Below it, a simple glass case. No velvet rope, no dramatic lighting, just a box of clarity tucked into the corner like it belonged there all along. Inside the case was the folder. the same one Eli carried on his lap through every denial, every hour spent waiting in that third chair from the left. The cover was worn smooth at the edges, spine frayed, pages still inside faded photocopies, field notes, medic scrawls, a war's worth of proof no one had wanted to read. One page lay open. Taped to it, still yellowed and curling, was the sticky note Marcus had written months before, half in frustration, half in reverence. Not every battle is fought with a rifle. Next to the display stood a single empty chair, not marked, not cordoned off, just there, waiting. Some mornings, people sat in it without knowing. Others avoided it altogether, as if the air around it felt heavier. The staff never touched it. The janitors never moved it. Even when new furniture arrived, that chair remained. Third from the left, always empty, unless it needed to be filled. Eli didn't come back often, but when he did, he never went near the glass case. He'd just sit quietly somewhere near the windows, sip burnt coffee, and watch the light shift across the wall that now bore his name. And sometimes, a young vet would stop, eyes catching on the plaque, hand resting on the glass not in tribute, but in understanding. Because, long after the war ends, the waiting room remains. And now, someone had left the door open behind them.